again, like I said, not just the football players and basketball players, but also people like Henry Mancini, Jesse Steinfeld, the Surgeon General, who was against cigarettes, and the story of the Aliquippa 10, which was the basis of the Wagner Act. It was the test case, and which basically legitimized unions in America. So this place was for me a microcosm. 100 years of attitude basically is the story that you could have called this book, because this is a town that stood for a way of American life that has come and gone, and we're still dealing with the after effects to this day in Aliquippa and in the rest of the country.
Sure. Yeah. So just to kind of pivot a little bit, and I wanted to bring up this this article that you wrote in 2018, because the subject matter, or not so much the subject matter, but kind of it's a little bit parallel. The article that you wrote about Luke Heimlich in 2018. Mm-hmm. And for people who don't know, so it was a pitcher in Oregon State that when he was 15 years old, pled guilty to sexually abusing his 6-year-old. Was it cousin or niece?
I believe it was a niece.
A niece. And then essentially, went through, and kind of due to a technical glitch, this history came to light, during his senior year of pitching. And, this kind of comes up in the sense of the, Trevor Bauer case, right? So obviously Trevor Bauer, got suspended from Major League Baseball. It was proven through, online internet, as far as kind of his being cleared of kind of those claims, and then him still not getting a job. And just Luke, from what I understand, he's pitching in Mexico. He hasn't even gotten a sniff from Major League. So kind of, and this is kind of a tricky subject, but like, what are your thoughts on, Luke and Trevor? Obviously one was, when he was 15 and pled guilty, and now Trevor, being kind of cleared of this in the court of public opinion, but then not still receiving a job yet. Kind of, what are your thoughts about kind of the second chances and almost the unwillingness of teams to do that, because it's more of a PR decision than it is a baseball decision?
Well, first of all, I can't even speak to the Trevor Bauer situation, because I'm just not versed in it enough, and It's obviously a sensitive. But I will say this: when it comes to, look, baseball's entertainment. Sports are entertainment. Like we're the idea that it's just an athletic pursuit that's purely done for the sake of winning and losing, and has gone by the boards. I mean, obviously. And I spoke to an MLB general manager. And obviously Luke Heimlich was rated incredibly high on the board, and he had done everything. He went through every step of rehabilitation, quote unquote, that he was asked to do, and he had never, as far as anybody knows, and of course we don't know, but as far as anybody knows, never had transgressed at all in this sense ever since that situation, which you have to read the story, because it's an incredibly complex situation. But the general manager I spoke to was like, what am I going to do? How in the world can I sell this? The fact is that you're going to have people picketing outside. You're going to, rightfully so, like you're going to have people understandably anguished by this, who are not going to be thinking about my baseball team and the purity of sports, which is quote unquote an escape from life, right? And instead is escapist entertainment. And so they've got to sell tickets. And the idea that every fifth day they were going to have this a protest ad like into infinity, like it would never end, and you're going to pay this guy a lot of money, and no one's going to be talking about how he breaks off a curveball. No one's going to be talking about, his changeup or his win streak. He could win 25 games. He could be 25-0.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
And so the general manager's like, you know what? It's just more trouble, literally more trouble than it's worth. And it does go against every sort of idea of especially juvenile rehabilitation, which is different than adult incarceration at this point. That's why the story is so complex, because juvenile treatment and incarceration still is based on a theory of rehabilitation. brains are not fully formed until the age of 25, so on and so forth. So it's these are people who you want to think we can still save, turn around, change. But in this instance, this was his career, this was his livelihood, this is where he poured his passion, and I'm talking about baseball. And as a result, he's not, because of the incredible stigma, understandable stigma of his
Sure.
crime. There's almost there's no coming back. How can you ask mothers to bring their children to see this guy pitch? You know, it's just so it's
Yeah.
nitroglycerin, and
Yeah.
but it makes you. The reason I liked, and like is the wrong word. The reason the story was so compelling to me was because it forced you to deal with, what do I think about rehabilitation? What do I think about juvenile crime? What do I think about this crime in particular? And as a result, everybody brings to it such a load of emotion and understandable, like I said, anguish at times, that it's a tinderbox. And frankly, you'll notice not many people, including ESPN, when they were broadcasting games or anything, would not even touch it, would not even talk about it, because it would open up such a Pandora's box.
Yep.
that they did, and it just, so they tried to stick to sports, but it was almost absurd, because it was there for everybody to see and think about. And I felt like, that's the kind of story that I think is worth doing, and is compelling, and is fascinating, and tells us something about ourselves.
Yeah.
Sure, and just kind of to add to the complexity of the story, like the entire reason why it even became public knowledge, or he did everything possible to, like you said, to go through that rehabilitation process, and it was no fault of his. But I think it was, in the article, it was kind of a lack of communication with the local police department that finally kind of, due to a clerical error, kind of brought this to light in the first place. So it wasn't even any fault of his. So that's how all of that stuff ended up coming out. And again, the anybody who, you know, uh, this is basically just like, out of this could be made into a television show, essentially. Just, and this is real life. I mean, but go read the story. The Luke Heimlich, SL Price, back in 2018. It's a, like you said, it brings a lot of emotion to the forefront, and it really is kind of the fork in the road when it comes to, at that point in time, you're almost forced to stop the article and kind of go over your own ideals before you continue to read the article, because it is complex, and it is, he did everything that he could. And we always say, all right, rehabilitation. But then when it comes to your professional life, it's really impacted him,
Right.
where he hasn't gone into the league yet. So I would suggest
Yeah.
that, everybody definitely go read it. It's a fantastic piece. And, it's funny because I read that back then. And then when Mark told me that you were coming on, I was just like, wait a minute. So then I Googled it real quick, and I was like, that's the story. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because it's a phenomenal piece.
Yeah.
Thank you. But it's like you said, I mean, it's as difficult as it was as difficult to write as it was to read. And it forces you to confront really what you think about a lot of issues that often are sort of dismissed within a soundbite. But if you actually really think about it, I'm not excusing either his behavior. I'm not excusing anything. I'm saying this is, in a way, this is what we're forced to think about when Luke Heimlich towed the rubber for a college, a college baseball team, and was the best college pitcher in the land.
Right. And it's incredibly unfortunate. But, Scott, when you talk about your experiences, I just can't, they're unimaginable. Like, you were in Atlanta when the bomb went off at the 1996 Olympic Games. You were in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. Then you made trip after trip in Athens for the run up to the 2004 Olympics, post the 9/11 world. And unfortunately, that this actually hits close to home for you, myself, and
Yeah.
Giff. The Boston Marathon. You were there in Boston for the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing. I can only imagine how difficult it was to balance being there for something unrelated to the marathon, which you were, and then having to cover and interview people who just witnessed like the worst nightmare of their lives. Like, how do you keep going on through these major events and just did you ever think about just stopping the coverage, for these big events?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to understand, what you just said. I mean, I grew up with no money, and journalism. I happen to be a part of journalism when it still was a going industry where they actually paid people to go around the world and do stories. I mean, I was in a soccer riot in 1990 at the World Cup. There. I've been to a lot of Grand Slams, a lot of Olympics, like you said. But look, I love sports, and I love how they reflect the cultures in which they happen. And by the way, the thing about the Boston Marathon, I got so lucky on this part of it. Like you said, I was in Boston. I was in Cambridge in a hotel. I think it was Cambridge,
Yeah, it's
and
Cambridge.
and
Yeah.
and I was not anywhere near the bombing site when it went off. And of course, when the bomb happened, everything got shut down. There was no going over there at all to like try and do the story. And this was a Monday, as you guys know, Patriots Day. Monday is when the magazine closes. And and literally I get a call, like, I mean, this is, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And my boss says, well, you got to write something about the Boston Marathon. This is happening right now. You're there. I'm like, yeah, but I'm in a hotel. And it just so happened that that hotel was a runner's hotel. So I went down into the lobby, and it
Wow.
just so happened that all these runners were coming back from the race. And and I literally had an hour. I had basically an hour. Now I worked for a newspaper for 10 years prior to being at Sports Illustrated. So I had written on deadline, but anybody who knows me will tell you I'm not a great deadline writer. And so literally I'm like, they're like, you got to get this in an hour because the magazine's closing. And this was what no one really remembers. They put it on the cover, incredible photo on the cover, iconic photo. It wasn't an SI photo. I believe it was a local Boston photographer. Incredible photo. So if what people don't remember is that the story was only my scorecard. It was a lead in scorecard. It was maybe, 800 words. It was not a massive breakdown of everything that happened. Basically, I talked to some people in the lobby for like 30 minutes. And then I had 30 minutes to like run upstairs and bang this thing out. But the photo is what people remember. What I did do the next year was I went back to Boston and wrote the Boston Strong cover. No, well, let me just stop for a second. I did stay in Boston the rest of that week, and I went to the first game that actually the first game was not the Red Sox. It was a Bruins game in the middle
Bruins,
of the week,
yes.
and
National
then I
anthem.
went
Yeah.
right, and then I went, and so that was incredible. The anthem was incredible, and then I went to the Red Sox game where Ortiz says that it's his city, as you know, and so I was there. And by the way, you couldn't really leave town either. So I there to